Today I have the privilege of interviewing a dear friend of mine. His name is Luciano Lombardi, and he's written a fascinating book called A New Humanity, and it's on the book of Ephesians. Luch, it's great to have you here, buddy.
Nice to be here, man.
You know, we've known each other how long now?
Oh gosh, I don't know, 15, 16 years?
15, 16 years, and we have had a lot of off-camera conversations about theology.
Oh, totally, yes.
Yeah.
A lot of conversations about Jesus and the first century. And
the Jewish roots of Christianity. We've talked about all this stuff.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and Luch is a professor at Master's College and Seminary, and on occasion when he feels the need to stir up the students a little bit because they're getting too comfortable in their theology, they call me in to shake things up a little bit. Yeah, and that's been a lot of fun going in and really teaching and talking with the kids.
And they love you when you come, and your stuff is so great. It just complements a lot of what we teach them. And so we're so awesome. Grateful. It's great to have the relationship and your friendship.
Yeah. Well, today they asked me, who do you want to interview on the show? And I said, oh, I want to talk to Luciano Lombardi, not just because he's a friend of mine, but because God has given you a really unique ability to look at Scripture from a different perspective. And I want to know, why did you write A New Humanity? What was the focus, and why did you feel like you needed to do it?
Well, it had to do with how we see Paul the Apostle, scripturally. And you know, there's 13 letters of Paul, so, you know, why Ephesians? Why not some of the other letters? Yeah. And I just feel that Ephesians has kind of been the neglected letter where Paul shares his large thoughts about who we are and about God's plan. And there's this beautiful vision Paul paints of God and him being Father and how we're drawn into this in terms of our identity. A Father created us, a cosmic, eternal Father. And so I just thought that's a message to get out to people. And to know that this is not just a God who lives somewhere way out there, disconnected from us. This is a Father who wants to be in relationship with us. And Paul draws all that in. In fact, what's so astounding about what Paul says in Ephesians chapter 1 is this collective idea that God thought of us before he ever created us. And that's really where our story begins, Joe. That's where the sense of identity. This was so clear for the Hebrews. You know this. I mean, through your Hebraic root stuff, their identity was God. He gave them identity. Well, that identity is for all of us. It's for the whole human race. And there's been mixed messages about God out there. And I think I wanted Paul to speak. You know, I wanted to go back to what Paul said here and see his message. And as a Jew, which people sometimes are surprised. They forget.
They don't see him that way normally.
No, they don't. No, they don't. And,
how's he seen by Christians?
Well, some don't make the connection at all. Right? Some don't make the connection that he was Jewish. He was born out in the Roman Empire from Tarsus. Yeah, he was Jew by name, but you know, he thought Greek. But no, he studied with Gamaliel. He was given at a young age to be in Judea. He knew the Scriptures. He went around persecuting Christians because they were damaging the Jewish faith.
Yeah, and he said that he was from the tribe of Benjamin. He was a Hebrew of Hebrews.
Oh, totally.
But we kind of miss that, don't we?
We miss that, and so when Jesus appears to him, it blows open his Jewish view of the world. And rather than eradicating it, he goes back and sees it all through Jesus. And that's important. And that makes a huge difference.
Changes it.
So if you recognize that with Paul, then what you actually see with Ephesians is a letter where Paul's free to think and write his big thoughts. Now, we think it's his last letter. So he's in jail. So picture this.
Sure, yeah.
He's in jail. He never mentions anything about his plight, right? I mean, if it was me, I'd be complaining, right? The surroundings, this is terrible.
Look how much I'm suffering.
Somebody help me out of here. But he doesn't do that. He actually talks about the first thing in his last letter, he talks about the Father.
Yeah.
That's the first thing he wants to share with anyone. This could be his last thoughts.
So it shows us how important that was, because
absolutely,
yeah, it could have been his final thought.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, you appreciate the Hebrew roots. So when we look at Father, the word Father, in the Old Testament, maybe we've got about 15 references to him as Father. When we get to the New Testament writers, we've got over 200.
Wow.
So what does that tell you? Well, what that tells you is that when Jesus walked this earth, what he got into the disciples' heads was that this God, he's Father, he's my Father, he's your Father.
That's so personal.
And doesn't that give us a great sense of identity? right?
It does.
Like I'm thinking about people watching today and thinking about their human life, where they started. Not all of us have good stories, right?
Right.
And but all of us began somewhere even before our parents, conceived us and we were born. Our story begins in the heart of the Father, says Paul, before the foundations of the world were created. God chose us. God thought of us. Isn't that great?
Before space, time was ever created, he thought of Luciano Lombardi.
Before he put the message in the stars, it was in his heart.
Wow.
Isn't that fantastic?
That's
and
beautiful.
so this sense of Father gives people identity. Like on the back of the book, I say to people, look, if you want to know your purpose, if you want to know your identity, your destiny, you've got to start with God, because that's where we began, right?
Yeah.
And when you know who your Father is, it changes your perspective. You could have the worst possible human story there is, but you know that God wanted you here because you were in his heart before he ever created. And for me, that's the message, right? People need to hear it.
And that's what you want people to take away from reading the book. It's not just another commentary or exposition on Ephesians. No. The heart of it is that you have not just a God, but a God who's a Father. Who loves you and has a purpose and a plan and a destiny and identity for your life.
Absolutely. When I teach Paul in his letters at Master's College, I start with Ephesians. Ephesians is the first letter I start with because he was free. He didn't have to address any church problems. Read all his other 12 letters. He's being a pastor. He's trying to address an issue.
He's putting out fires all the time.
Absolutely. But in Ephesians, it's his last letter where he was able to just share his thoughts. I want to leave something behind to remind people of who we are. And Ephesians is the best place to go for that.
Okay. Now, because Paul has always kind of been seen as this guy who hijacked Christianity, or he's the founder of Christianity, how does seeing Paul from a Jewish perspective, how does that change the way that we see him or maybe interpret some of his teaching?
Well, it gives you, first of all, it gives you that important continuity with the Old Testament.
Okay.
Which we lose. You can't read the New Testament without understanding the whole Hebrew context, because those New Testament writers, they're all Jewish, they're all Hebrew, they're all writing from the context that, okay, I'm still Jewish, but now Jesus has appeared. What do I do with that? Well, they spell it out, right? They explain to us what Jesus did when they embraced him after his resurrection. How did this all play itself out? And so Paul being Jewish is crucial to this. If we don't read his Jewishness into it, we will misread his letters, because we'll read it from a Greek perspective. And if you read it from a Greek perspective, then you've got this, God's somewhere far away from here. We're down here. There's no sense of relationship. But see, for Hebrews, God, in the wilderness, if we were to go back in time and ask a Jew in the wilderness, where's God? Where would they point? Well, they wouldn't point up. They say, God's over there in the tabernacle. Right?
Okay.
That's God. That's the context of God. And Paul carries that into his letters in terms of Jesus bringing this all alive to him. And God had to stop Paul in his tracks to reveal Jesus to him so that Paul caught this. And so Paul's not anti-Jewish. I just want everybody to know that. That's so important. Paul is Jewish to the core, and it's on account of the resurrection, the account in Acts, Governor Felix. It's on account of the resurrection that I'm here. Right? I haven't betrayed my Jewishness. I haven't betrayed my background. I just know now who culminates all this, who confirms the whole Hebrew story. Right?
Well, I've been fortunate enough to be able to read this book. I had a special edition given to me by the author himself, but we want you to get a copy of A New Humanity. Luch, where can people find the book?
They can go to my website at coachlombardi.ca.
Okay.
It's in ebook form on all the formats, in iBooks and Kobo and Kindle. And they could look at their local Christian bookstore too. Some of them are carrying it as well.
Well, I'm glad we finally had this conversation in front of a camera. You have a lot to talk about.
Well, thanks for inviting me, and it's a privilege.
Oh, awesome.
Thanks, Joe.
It's been so great talking with Luch, and the one thing that really stuck out to me was getting that identity in God. Not taking on the identity that the world says you have or the system of this world says you have, but who God says you are, that you are highly favored, you are blessed, and He loves you. And we want you to take that message with you every day of your life.